Volcanic eruptions are one of the most powerful forces on Earth. From spectacular lava fountains to deadly explosions, they can bury entire cities under superheated clouds of ash and gas, or turn quiet rivers into seething torrents of mud and debris. Scientists are struggling to understand these unpredictable time bombs.
We were taken by surprise by what turned out to be an unprecedented event.
We'll circle the globe, profiling some of the most significant eruptions of our time, each more devastating than the last, each leading to a potential mega eruption that could change the world as we know it. Volcanic eruptions are dramatic reminders that our world is a living planet. Their destructive force is 4 billion years old, a force that commands respect. Volcanoes combine the beauty and the beast, the power to create and to destroy. From the very beginning, they've served a vital function, releasing heat, gas, and minerals from deep beneath the Earth's crust. These byproducts proved vital to human life, creating the Earth's atmosphere. If volcanoes did not exist, neither would we.
To me, they're one of the most beautiful things you can ever witness. But to the people who live under them, they're the most terrifying and destructive thing you can ever witness.
Cameraman Jeff Mackley's mission to film the world's volcanoes comes with risks. On one mountain, he avoided death by moments when a lethal mixture of hot gas and ash just missed him.
There was a loud roar like a freight train, and a pyroclastic flow came down the valley that we'd just been in. So, yeah, another 5 minutes either way, it would have been curtains for us.
Mackley risks his life to record volcanoes' beauty. Others risk theirs to record their power.
Many of us have experiences that could either have gone one way or the other, depending upon just something small that happened.
In the past 60 years, volcanic eruptions have killed at least 27 scientists. Even so, their quest for knowledge continues. On average, between 50 and 60 volcanoes erupt every year. About 20 are erupting at any given moment. All are vents in the Earth's surface. Most take place within the Ring of Fire, an area around the Pacific Basin where tectonic plates collide, allowing molten rock or magma to be released. Thick magma loaded with gas triggers explosive eruptions. Thinner magma with less gas is less volatile. To compare and categorize eruptions, scientists have developed the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI scale. Each notch up the scale means a higher ash cloud, more ejected material, and greater explosive energy. The events profiled here begin with a non-explosive eruption and peak with a planet-altering super eruption, one that experts say will eventually happen. Hawaii is a stunning tropical paradise. But under the brilliant sand and lush forests simmers a cauldron of tremendous heat and violence. This is the site of one of the most spectacular volcanic creations on the planet. All of the Hawaiian Islands are volcanoes, built over 70 million years by a powerful geological formation called, appropriately, a hotspot.
A hotspot is a narrow zone which has an excess amount of heat in it. And the heat rises, and relatively near the Earth's surface, this heat melts the rocks, and then that melted rock erupts as lava.
February 1983. Kilauea, on the big island of Hawaii, sends lava fountains 80 meters into the air. Because Because the magma is thin and doesn't contain much gas, the eruption is not explosive, but it's still dangerous. For 7 years, the eruption continues. The lava inches forward, slow enough to outrun, but totally unstoppable. In February 1990, it reaches the fishing village of Kilauea. Hundreds are evacuated.
It became a very painful experience, actually, to watch this because it was just creeping through town, you know. Every week or so, another block's worth of houses were gone.
Residents have time to pack up their belongings and, in some cases, their entire homes. Others can only watch as the lava destroys their past.
We moved out that afternoon, and 2 days later, our home was engulfed by flames. And we were able to watch the lava come into our yard.
By December, the entire village is gone, buried under more than 15 meters of molten rock.
Behind me is the eastern edge of what used to be the town of Kilauea. In 1990, there were about 150 homes out here, and they've been buried by about 5 stories worth of lava.
Despite the hardships caused by the volcano, some Hawaiians see beyond their personal tragedy. They respect the power and the beauty of the lava, a force they worship as a goddess named Pele.
We don't really resent or feel like it was a loss for us, because we know that Pele, this is her land, her aina, and she can come anytime she wants to and go anywhere she wants to.
The Hawaiians were unable to stop Kilauea's enormous lava flow. But 4,800 kilometers away, an entire nation took a desperate stand when a volcano threatened one of their towns. On January 23, 1973, the Eldfell volcano erupts on the Icelandic island of Hime. A slow-moving lava flow more than 10 meters high threatens to engulf the village of Vestmannaeyjar. The majority of the village is evacuated, but a dedicated team stays behind to confront the formidable force. Over 5 months, crews spray approximately 6 million cubic meters of seawater onto the lava flows. Nearly 4 million cubic meters of molten lava is converted into solid rock. The village is saved. Such a Herculean effort is impossible with Kilauea. The flow is simply too great. The lava that destroyed Kilauea plows on, pouring into the sea in a spectacular collision.
Where the lava goes into the ocean, it makes one of probably the most beautiful places on the flow field, but it's also one of the most dangerous.
Below the solidifying lava, unstable sand is prone to sudden and violent collapse.
All of a sudden, all this hot lava is on the surface, it just snaps off. The ocean rushes in and it creates huge explosions that send gigantic plumes of material up in the air, and they cover maybe 3 or 4 football fields in area, sending out rocks the size of like soccer balls or basketballs all over the area.
This impressive display is a glimpse into prehistoric times when volcanoes first formed land. The same process is still happening today.
It builds new beaches, and then these beaches, the lava then can flow over, and it builds that out, a sequential set of beaches, and then lava flow and beach, lava flow, and it builds out a new piece of land that we call a lava delta.
Since 1983, Kilauea has displaced almost 200 families and destroyed millions of dollars worth of property. In that same time, it's added more than 200 hectares of land to the island, continuing the 70 million year process that created all of Hawaii. It's a stunning example of how a volcano creates and destroys at the same time. Its slowly oozing magma is a permanent threat, but rarely produces a violent explosion. In our next event, thicker magma trapped in a geological powder keg triggers a much more explosive volcanic eruption. Lethal white-hot clouds of gas descend on thousands of people, wiping out an entire Caribbean capital. And later, in our mega-disaster scenario, a supervolcano strikes the heart of Europe, demolishing a major city and casting a shadow over the entire planet. The stunning lava fountains and flows of Kilauea on the big island of Hawaii both create and destroy, but rarely are lethal. But there are much more explosive and dangerous volcanoes, ones that spew out deadly gas and ash clouds. One such volcano ravaged half a nation and sent 19 to their graves. Montserrat is a lush and tranquil Caribbean retreat. But in 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano, quiet for nearly 400 years, rumbles back to life. Over the next 2 years, multiple eruptions shoot ash thousands of feet into the air. The capital of Plymouth is evacuated twice. Each time, the residents return, hoping the volcano's rage is over. On June 25th, 1997, those hopes are buried. At 1 p.m., a giant ash cloud erupts nearly 10 kilometers high. In the next 30 minutes, close to 800-degree mixtures of ash and rock race downhill at more than 100 kilometers an hour. The lethal clouds are called pyroclastic flows. Roy Daly lives 3 kilometers from the volcano. He hears the eruption and rushes outside to see the flow racing by him, less than 50 meters away.
Started to feel some heat, and the darkness started to roll over the road. So I got in my car and I sped away like crazy. I drove on top the hill, away from the pyroclastic flow.
The force of the thick mixture of gas, ash and rocks flattens everything in its path. Roy watches helplessly as entire villages are destroyed. He's managed to escape the pyroclastic flows, but he's not out of danger yet.
I was scared to death. I thought I wasn't gonna live. It was so dark that if you put your hands to your face, you couldn't see them. Hot ash raining down on you, real hot ash. I felt scared. I couldn't move, I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe properly. So, of course, I felt I was gonna die. But I was hoping I didn't die, and I didn't.
Roy is finally evacuated by helicopter, but not everyone is able to escape. Dr. Sue Laughlin is the director of the Montserrat Volcano Observatory and a witness to the eruption.
The maximum speed of pyroclastic flows on that day could have been in excess of 150 miles per hour. Even though people saw it coming, there was very little they could do to make their escape.
The nearly 8 million cubic meters of flow covers thousands of square kilometers of land, damages or demolishes more than 100 homes, and destroys the island's only airport. Other than one ferry service, Montserrat is cut off from the rest of the world. But the volcano is not finished. Over the next 4 months, eruptions and pyroclastic flows continue to devastate the island.
We had over 70 explosions in 1 month. Sometimes there were 4 explosions a day. Each explosion generated a mushroom cloud which rose rapidly to great heights above the volcano. Each explosion generated pyroclastic flows which spread in all directions around the volcano. You can see behind me the impact on Gage's Mountain of surges as they came over the mountain during one of these explosions and singed and burned all the vegetation there.
The pyroclastic flow's toll on the island's natural resources is immense. The human toll is 19 lives. The cause of this violent and tragic eruption lies deep below the lush island. The same process that created this tropical paradise threatens to destroy it. Here, the North and South American tectonic plates collide with and plunge below the Caribbean plate in a process called subduction.
The subduction takes place at about 130 kilometers depth, that's about 80 miles below the surface of the Earth. As the plate goes down, parts of it melt, and this forms magma. And the magma works its way up to the surface over many thousands of years.
Unlike Kilauea, the Soufriere Hills volcano produces thick magma. Over thousands of years, it forms the classic steep volcanic cone called a stratovolcano. The magma contains a variety of gases, all under intense pressure. It slowly rises until it reaches the Earth's surface when the pressure is released. Just like a bottle of champagne, the gases suddenly expand and the volcano violently erupts. Thousands of kilometers away in Bari, Italy, scientists are studying Soufriere Hills' most lethal side effect.
The purpose of these experiments is to understand the dynamics of pyroclastic flows, so to be prepared for the next events.
Dr. Delino and his team load about 200 kilos of actual volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius into a cylinder. Pressurized gas creates an explosion that ejects the ash. The volcanologists track the height, direction, and density of the ash with a variety of instruments and high-speed cameras. The models here are big enough to be accurately scaled up to actual events, something that could not be achieved in a lab. The experiments have determined that both the amount of magma and the force applied to it are critical in the creation of pyroclastic flows. Next, researchers will match the test with the topography of specific volcanoes. They'll then be able to pinpoint specific areas where pyroclastic flows are likely to strike. Local authorities can evacuate those areas prior to an eruption, potentially saving many lives. But tragically, for those in the path of stratovolcanoes like Soufriere Hills, pyroclastic flows and ashfall aren't the only threats. Every year, between 1,200 and 2,000 millimeters of rain fall on Montserrat. Heavy rains run down the channels created by the pyroclastic flows, transforming them into massive mudslides called lahars.
Most of this debris that we see around us is caused by lahars, washing all the pyroclastic flow debris further down the hill and progressively burying Plymouth under all this mud and boulders.
Lahars have buried so much of Plymouth that the city has been permanently abandoned. They were the volcano's final salvo in a brutal one-sided war. The Soufriere Hills volcano destroyed more than 1,000 homes, left more than half of the island uninhabitable, and destroyed the nation's capital. About 4,500 people remain on the once thriving island of 12,000.
It was sad to see people just having to go by droves out of Montserrat. But it was understandable because these people had lost their properties. It was a pure strength why I stayed here. I mean, you had no place to go, no place to live, with families and friends being shacked up still in schools and churches. It was difficult and it was very sad.
But the volcano has also created new opportunities that have helped revitalize the island. Volcano-related tourism is rising. Roy Daly owns and operates a tour bus business.
People are anxious to see a live volcano. I don't think there's any place on the face of the earth that you could see a live volcano from approximately 1 mile from it bubbling and rolling and rocking, right?
Though Soufriere Hills' multiple pyroclastic flows and lahars were lethal and destructive, its eruptions never exceeded a 3 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. But when a VEI-5 fires a single 24 megaton blast, it destroys thousands of acres of land and kills dozens of people. And later, scientists explore the potential for a super eruption, one unseen in modern times, one that could kill millions. The pyroclastic flows and lahars of the Soufriere Hills volcano on Montserrat destroyed the island's capital, killed 19, and changed the nation's landscape and thousands of lives forever. In 1980, America's Pacific Northwest experienced a different and rare type of eruption that acted like a giant cannon blast. flattening entire forests and killing dozens. The Cascades are an 1,100-kilometer-long majestic range stretching from Canada to Northern California. Hundreds of thousands of hikers and skiers find refuge and adventure here. But in the spring of 1980, one of the Cascades' crown jewels begins to fracture. In March, small earthquakes ripple deep below the peak of Mount St. Helens. After more than 120 years of slumber, the mountain is awakening.
This seismicity is typical of volcanoes when they reawaken, because as molten rock tries to push its way up underneath the volcano, it makes a lot of noise in terms of shouldering aside the hard rock that makes the edifice of the volcano itself.
On May 17, Keith Ronholm, a geophysics graduate student intrigued by the mountain's activity, decides to get a closer look.
Mount St. Helens was erupting about every 5 or 8 days. I had gone to a place called Bear Meadow to try to get a view of one of these small summit eruptions.
Ronholm gets far more than he bargained for. At 8:32 on the morning of May 18, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake rips through the volcano's north side. 2.8 billion cubic meters of earth falls at speeds of up to 257 kilometers an hour.
I was reading a book in my truck when I heard some people yelling, and I looked over at the mountain, and the entire north side of the mountain was sliding down.
The Earth's movement releases the enormous pressure holding the magma inside the volcano. A 24-megaton blast, over 1,800 times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb, shatters the north face of the mountain. The blast is unusual in that it doesn't shoot straight up as most eruptions do. This is a rare lateral blast, slamming a huge cloud of rocks, trees, and ash approximately 180 degrees out from the mountain.
There was a puff of dark gray churning ash, and within 10-15 seconds, that ash had expanded out and had covered the entire mountain. All of this was happening silently, and there was no noise to reinforce my flight response. I was 10 miles away, and you don't, at least initially, feel like something's going to hurt you from 10 miles away. So I stood there and I took pictures, and I was fascinated by watching this event.
As the huge cloud of debris races over the two ridges between the volcano and Ronholm at 483 kilometers an hour, Keith suddenly realizes he's in serious danger.
As I'm driving out, I took one last picture over my shoulder, and it's a little motion blurred, but I couldn't take time to frame it or stop because I was driving, and I remember looking back at the little parking area, realizing that I was the last person to leave and thinking maybe I'd waited a little bit too long because this cloud was rushing towards me.
Luckily for Ronholm, the strongest part of the blast heads north and northwest. The portion that's heading northeast, directly towards him, has less energy, allowing him to escape down the mountain. The lateral blast spews ash and gas up to a height of 24 kilometers. Less than an hour later, a vertical eruption sends more ash skyward. Into this grim scene flies Jess Hageman with the Washington Army National Guard.
Most of the trees were blown over by the eruption, and we're talking about 14, 15 miles downstream of Mount St. Helens. The whole landscape was changed. It made you feel like sort of a gnat flying around the universe, because in comparison to the size of the eruption, it was amazing.
Amazing and horrific. 800-degree pyroclastic flows race down the steep flanks at up to 129 kilometers an hour. In some places, they are 37 meters thick. In the early hours of the disaster, the enormity of the destruction to the landscape is impossible to comprehend. But it only takes one sobering moment for Jess Hageman to realize the human toll.
It was on this ridge right straight ahead of us here that we found the first 2 survivors in the blast area. And that turned out to be Jim Skamanki and his partner, Leonti Skirkadov. And we eventually were able to pick those 2 people up. Leonti died in the hospital after we got him there, but Jim is still alive and survived.
Rescuers find a handful of stunned survivors, but the eruption kills 57, mostly campers and tourists. 9 hours after its start, the eruption ends. Scientists struggle to comprehend the enormous scope of the event. Before the eruption, Mount St. Helens stood at 2,949 meters tall. Now, it's 401 meters shorter. The blast destroyed enough trees to build 300,000 houses. Thousands of logs still litter Spirit Lake, 5 kilometers from the summit. The volcano shot out more than 508 million tons of ash that spread across the entire US in 3 days. 2 days after the eruption, geologists get their first close look at the desolation.
It was like walking on the moon. I have never seen anything like it. This entire area, which is 600 square kilometers or 230 square miles, was totally devastated. There wasn't a living thing in that entire area, not an insect or a bird or an animal. There was only one color, and it was this gray color of the deposits. The ground was covered with hot rocks, and there were fumes and hot gases coming out of the ground all over the place.
In the months following the eruption, teams of experts carefully study every facet of the mountain. One oddity of Mount St. Helens was that some people heard the eruption as far away as Canada, but eyewitnesses like Keith Ronholm, just 16 kilometers away, heard nothing.
Because of the way the temperature structure in the atmosphere gets cooler with height, that the sound waves from explosions are bent away from the surface of the Earth. And when they reach the stratosphere and the temperature again increases with height, they're bent back down. So no one between 6 and 60 miles from Mount St. Helens heard the May 18th eruption.
Since 1980, the mountain has experienced tens of thousands of small earthquakes and numerous minor eruptions. Most significantly, since 2004, the volcano has been continuously erupting lava, creating a giant lava dome that is still growing today. It's volcanologists like Rick Lahusen's job to find ways to monitor all of this activity.
What we needed was a way to get our instruments out there very quickly without putting people on the ground in harm's way, and yet still be able to monitor changes in the eruption. So what we came up with is this stainless steel superstructure, which kind of looks like a daddy long-legged spider, so we kind of call them spiders. This is a GPS antenna which receives timing signals from satellites and lets us locate exactly where this is. The signals go into the computer system, and then the data come out at the request from computers back in the office and are transmitted out through this antenna.
With the spider securely attached to a chopper, it's time to head into the belly of the beast. As they approach the crater, the new lava dome is visible, spewing out sulfur dioxide gas and steam. This is proof that magma is reaching the surface with the potential to build to another eruption. The most dangerous moment for Rick and his pilot comes as they place the spider on the lava dome. This close to the crater floor, exploding rocks or a sudden burst of steam could easily kill them. Operating with the precision of surgeons, the men carefully place the spider directly on top of the lava dome. Within seconds, the device begins gathering and transmitting data. At the Cascades Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, Lahusen analyzes the spider's digital camera images. Time-lapse photography shows the lava dome's formidable growth.
What's really phenomenal about this is how much rock is coming out of the ground. It's taller than the Empire State Building. It's coming up at 5 meters per day, more than 200 meters across, and it's right here in our backyard.
No conclusions have been drawn yet about the lava dome's rapid growth. Geologists warn that an eruption similar to the 1980 event is possible, but unlikely. They are certain, however, that future eruptions of some sort will occur. Whatever its future, the mountain's recent past continues to reverberate today, especially for those who were there.
It's just an amazing event to witness that we normally think of the Earth as being a very static, stable environment that doesn't change. But when you get to watch a volcanic eruption and you watch a giant piece of the Earth slide away, followed by this dynamic churning ash cloud that flattens tens of square miles of forest, you realize how powerful nature can be and how powerful geologic forces can be.
Mount St. Helens VEI-5 lateral blast destroyed a massive amount of land and killed 57 people. Just one notch up the scale, a VEI-6 volcano kills hundreds when its huge eruption is followed by a long series of deadly side effects. And later, scientists reveal the unthinkable effects of a mega eruption that they guarantee will happen sometime in the future. The VEI-5 lateral blast eruption at Mount St. Helens flattened 600 square kilometers of land and killed 57 people. But there's one volcano that's in a class by itself. It killed hundreds, afflicted millions, and affected the entire planet. Its eruption was just the first in a series of tragic events that went on for days, months, and years that continue to this day. Luzon is the largest of the Philippine islands. It's home to 56 million people, the capital city of Manila, and Mount Pinatubo. For centuries, thousands have lived on and around the mountain. Farmers harvest rice and other crops from its fertile soil. What many locals didn't know or believe is that the mountain is a volcano. Even most experts who knew it was thought it was inactive. On June 9, 1991, the mountain erupts for the first time in more than 500 years. Eruptions, earthquakes, pyroclastic flows, and ash batter the island day and night. Geologist Dr. Kelvin Rodolfo arrives 4 days later.
The amount of ash was falling so thickly you couldn't see any more than 20 feet. There were pieces the size of chicken eggs that were landing on us.
On June 15th, a massive eruption spews 5 cubic kilometers of volcanic debris 35 kilometers high. The top of the mountain collapses, triggering a series of large earthquakes. Rodolfo is one of thousands trapped in the city of Olongapo, 33 kilometers from Pinatubo.
I was terrified continually during the eruption. Every 3 minutes or so, there was a noticeable tremor, one of the magnitude that would cause you impulsively to want to run outside of a building.
But outside, the scene is equally terrifying.
Reddish lightning was darting horizontally above people. And the claps of thunder were practically simultaneous with the lightning.
This intra-cloud lightning is caused by static electricity in the ash cloud. It's seldom dangerous because it strikes horizontally instead of vertically. Still, fear of the conditions outside stops many locals from sweeping the ash off their roofs, something that will have fatal consequences. On the same day as the eruption, a typhoon strikes Luzon. The heavy rains mix with the ash. Since ash consists of fine particles of rock and minerals, Adding water turns it into a cement-like substance. For those with several centimeters of ash on their roofs, the mixture is a deadly one.
The passing typhoon saturated the ash with water, making it a lot heavier, causing roofs to fall in and pull the walls of houses in after them.
As if that isn't enough, vast pyroclastic flows fill the valleys around Pinatubo with debris. Once again, the typhoon turns a volcanic byproduct into a lethal weapon, lahars. Lahars form when a large amount of debris rapidly mixes with a huge amount of water. The powerful mass churns downstream, destroying anything and anyone unlucky enough to be caught in their path.
If you imagine a bulldozer traveling perhaps 15 miles per hour, hitting the substructure of a bridge, the bridge is taken out, and that's the impact that large rafted boulders had.
After 9 nightmarish hours, the eruptions end. More than 300 people are dead, and tens of thousands are homeless. As bad as things are, they could have been much worse. In the months prior to the eruption, locals reported seismic activity. Ongoing scientific monitoring confirmed the reports. Guided by experts who pointed out specific high-risk zones, officials evacuated more than 58,000 people in the days and hours leading up to the eruption.
Prior to the eruption, we had made maps that anticipated where the tephra would fall, and that depended on the seasonal winds.
But in still another deadly development, the typhoon changed the wind direction. Areas that had been considered safe were inundated with a deadly mix of tephra, or ash, and rain that crushed homes and the people in them. As thousands begin the massive cleanup, the volcano's effects become global. 1 month after the eruption, the huge ash cloud circles the Earth. In the upper atmosphere, sulfur dioxide is converted into sulfuric acid aerosols. They reflect the sun's radiation away from the Earth, cooling the entire planet's surface by 1 degree. The effects on the Earth's atmosphere will last more than 2 years. Back in the Philippines, the volcano's after effects continue. In the 3 months following the eruption, heavy rains trigger more than 200 lahars.
As time progressed and the flows eroded deeper and deeper into the lahars, the channels got larger and larger and became much more efficient conduits for the slurries to flow down.
To help the hundreds of thousands of people in harm's way, lookouts are stationed upriver. When they sight a lahar, they radio priests like Father Nestor Tayeg, who ring their church bells in warning.
The bell sounds would be heard by the community any time of the night like an alarm, a warning. Warning, be prepared, lahar is coming.
But once again, a twist of fate conspires against the people of Luzon. In October 1995, another large typhoon strikes the island and lookouts are put on alert.
Unfortunately, the heavy rains that triggered the lahars were not yet loaded with sediment when they passed this watch point.
Consequently, the lookouts radio that nothing but floodwater is coming down the mountain. But as the water runs down the channel, it erodes a lot of loose material, bulking up the lahar into a mixture estimated at 80% sediment and only 20% water. The larger the percentage of sediment, the faster and more powerful the lahar. It strikes with incredible force.
It was making this noise, this sound, just like rampaging horses. It was coming closer. Suddenly, it invaded our parish church. The second floor of my rectory where I live was buried, and I climbed on top of the bell tower. The lahar still kept coming. You can actually hear the lahar still rising, burying the second floors of most houses. You can hear people screaming. It was very dark. You can't see a thing.
The lahar kills dozens and buries the entire town of Bacolor. Like cement, the remains of the lahar dry quickly and turn rock hard. Today, the entire village is built on top of the dried-out lahar. Eerie reminders of the devastation are everywhere, including Father Ness's church, where a new floor had to be built over 7 meters of mud. Since 1991, thousands of lahars have killed nearly 400 people and destroyed more than 42,000 homes. But scientists fear that Pinatubo is still not finished. On top of the mountain, a new threat is forming. Not magma, but years of heavy rainfall that have created a giant lake in the volcano's caldera. It breached its banks in 2002, generating a massive lahar. Geologists are concerned about a huge fault that runs through the area.
The rocks weakened by the fault are more easily eroded, and the walls of the channel are very steep, and so landslides could fall and plug the channel and cause the lake level to rise again and then spontaneously flush out in large amounts. That would generate new large lahars.
The lake contains 100 million cubic meters of water. 46,000 people live below it. All would be threatened by a major lahar. To date, the eruption and lahars have affected almost 2 million people. For the battered but resilient residents of Luzon, Pinatubo is a constant threat. For scientists, it's an ongoing spectacle.
In geological training, we are accustomed to thinking in terms of small events repeated over millions, tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of years to generate mountains. But here we see events happening within a day. A huge amount of pyroclastic material, a huge hole developed over a matter of hours or days. And that, to me, is very fascinating.
The devastating byproducts of the Pinatubo eruption had long-term effects that killed hundreds, effects that continue to this day. But a mega eruption, one that volcanologists are certain will happen, could threaten millions. The VEI-6 eruption of Mount Pinatubo and its after-effects killed more than 700, sent a huge ash and gas cloud around the globe, and lowered the Earth's surface temperature. If we were to experience a VEI-7 super eruption, it would be 10 times larger. It would destroy all life for dozens of kilometers. It would drastically change the Earth's climate, and scientists say it will happen someday. The 5 million people in the Naples, Italy area live in the highest volcanic risk zone in the world. Approximately 11 kilometers to the east is Mount Vesuvius. Its 79 AD eruption killed more than 20,000 in Pompeii and other villages. Since then, the volcano has erupted 50 times, most recently in 1944. Vesuvius looms over Naples as a constant threat. But 15 kilometers to the west is a far less conspicuous but potentially far more deadly volcano, Campi Flegrei. Campi Flegrei is an enormous 13-kilometer wide caldera with a series of craters scattered inside. 350,000 people actually live within the caldera walls. Since Campi Flegrei is not a tall, imposing volcano like Vesuvius, it attracts little attention. But volcanologists like Steve Self know the massive power it contains.
Here we are in the middle of a volcano that's got a remarkable history of eruptions since it was first formed about 35,000 years ago. This area has had repeated eruptions, forming the craters like the one we're in. We're in a volcanic crater that still has steam vents acting and hissing, as you can hear behind us.
These steam vents reach temperatures of nearly 700 degrees. To a casual observer, that's impressive. But to experts, the vents, along with ground shifts, are ominous warning signs. An indicator of Campiflagre's power lies in deposits left by a massive eruption 35 to 40,000 years ago. It was 10,000 times larger than the 1991 Pinatubo eruption. These 80-meter-tall cliffs in Sorrento, 30 kilometers from Campiflagre, are composed of volcanic material left from the super eruption. Volcanologist Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo knows they are geological proof that enormous pyroclastic flows swept through this entire area.
The pyroclastic flow moved this way as a turbulent cloud and then emplaced en masse, thus causing the burying of all the area around Naples.
What scientists know about Campiflagre's past gives them a realistic model of what could happen in its future. The scenario begins with a massive disturbance somewhere within the vast caldera. A super eruption. More than 242 cubic kilometers of dust, gas and pumice hurtle into the air.
It would bury very large areas, the size of a major city or more, in thicknesses of ash that are hundreds of feet thick.
Enormous pyroclastic flows race from the volcano at near supersonic speeds. Buildings that aren't already buried by ash are knocked down by the force of the flows, or incinerated by their 800-degree temperatures. The once proud city is completely annihilated. The death toll from the flows and ash is apocalyptic.
We can assume that in case of a super eruption, several million of people will be killed.
The casualties and destruction spread far beyond the immediate area. The eruption column grows to a staggering height of 30 kilometers. Heavy ashfall smothers towns near the caldera and spreads as far away as Rome, 225 kilometers away. The city is pelted with more than 20 centimeters of ash. Enough to cause roofs to collapse and kill thousands of people. Smaller amounts of ash fall across Eastern Europe and parts of Asia, but even small amounts of ash cause big problems.
Even a dusting of a few centimeters would create total disruption to transport systems, to water supplies, to things that we regularly rely on in our daily life. Enough to bury plants, enough to strip the branches and leaves off trees and things like that.
The enormous quantity of ash and sulfuric dioxide released by the volcano triggers a planet-wide condition, one affecting millions.
Atmospheric models are predicting that the temperature could drop several degrees centigrade, and this would affect weather for many years, 4 or 5 years perhaps after a very large eruption. And temperatures would change, areas where crops would grow may not be able to grow those crops.
Huge areas of vegetation would die. Millions could starve to death. Ultimately, the entire planet and everyone on it would be dramatically affected.
If you consider the number of volcanoes, supervolcanoes around the world that could potentially produce super eruptions, recognizing the fact that there are probably several out there that we don't know about yet, we've still got a huge amount to learn about this scale of volcanism, then there's possibly something like a 1% chance that an eruption could happen in the next 100 years, which is quite high, actually.
High enough for scientists to urge discussions of this type of disaster in the international community. Volcanologists know that there is no way to prevent an eruption. So they learn from the past and study the present in order to help mankind prepare for the future. Tsunami, the ocean's deadliest force. Giant waves with immense power. Massive, unstoppable, deadly.
A level of destruction that was, over hundreds of miles of the coastline.
We'll travel the globe investigating some of the world's most devastating tsunamis. Each bigger than the last. Each packing more punch. Each taking us one step closer to a mega tsunami. A wave that will not just rewrite the record books, it will erase them. No coastline on the planet is truly safe from tsunamis. They're caused by massive displacements of water, triggered by the Earth's most powerful forces, earthquakes, landslides, and volcanic eruptions.
As long as we have earthquakes on Earth and landslides, the various phenomena that create tsunamis, we're going to have tsunami waves. It's just a matter of time when the next one strikes.
Tsunamis are dramatically different from the typical waves that constantly sweep across the planet. They can travel faster than 800 kilometers per hour. They can stretch for thousands of square kilometers across the ocean's surface.
It's a good 15, 20 feet tall. Easy.
They strike with huge mass and terrifying velocity. The most common method of gauging their height is run-up, the wave's highest point of impact on land. Each tsunami profiled here has a higher run-up than the last. Over 100 major tsunamis have struck in the past 100 years, killing hundreds of thousands and destroying billions of dollars of property. But they are not the biggest tsunamis to strike the planet. Scientists have found startling evidence that even larger waves have occurred in the past, mega tsunamis.
These things have been described as culture-ending events.
Experts believe that a mega tsunami lies in our future. To understand its power, scale, and potential, we'll first investigate 5 of the most destructive tsunamis of the past 60 years. Each has its own character, each has its own story, each brings us closer to a mega disaster. Hawaii is a tropical paradise that attracts millions of tourists. But this Pacific island holds a dark secret. It's blasted by more tsunamis than almost anywhere else on the planet.
The Hawaiian Islands, sitting as they do in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, are affected by tsunamis from all regions of the Pacific.
The Ring of Fire is a volatile fracture zone surrounding the Pacific Ocean plate. 90% of the world's earthquakes occur here. Earthquakes are the most common cause of tsunamis, which is why Hawaii gets hit often and from all directions.
Destructive tsunamis struck here in 1837, 1868, 1877, 1923, 1946, 52, 57, 60, and 64.
This makes it the unofficial tsunami capital of the Pacific. 2:28 a.m., April 1st, 1946. A magnitude 8.1 earthquake rips through the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. A huge stretch of the ocean floor is uplifted, displacing the entire column of water above it. A massive pulse of energy propels a wall of water, a tsunami, towards Hawaii at nearly 800 kilometers per hour. "3,800 kilometers away, in the small seaside village of Laupahoehoe, children and teachers gather to prepare for the day's classes. Marsu McShane is one of the teachers.
We were in our cottages, and the Akionas who lived in that house that's no longer there
knocked on our door and said, "Come see the tidal wave."
At first glance, it's deceptively innocent.
We looked over and the ocean sucked out, and then it came in a little bit more, like emptying a bathtub, and sucked out again. And we said, "This is a tidal wave? I don't think much of that."
What Masu doesn't know is that tsunamis are not single waves. They move forward in what's known as a tsunami train, a group of waves of many different sizes. First waves are seldom the largest, so what appears to be insignificant is actually the precursor to something much, much bigger.
And then it did it again. And this time, it went in further and sucked out more. And we thought, a twin tidal wave, how interesting and odd.
As the water recedes, an extraordinary 152 meters, Masu and her roommates pose for a photograph. Masu stands captivated while a third wave approaches.
Famous last words, I said, "I hope this will be a big one." And it kept coming. And that was the first time we ever thought to be afraid.
As the tsunami approaches shore, it behaves like a giant train wreck. The front of the wave slows while the back continues to push. The wave's energy is compressed, forcing it to stand and lift out of the sea.
This got bigger, and so we dropped the camera, ran inside. I can remember the water just crashed in the windows. The roof fell down.
The wave tosses Masu like a rag doll, at first in towards the school, but then suddenly out towards the sea.
And I knew I was going to die.
Masu spends the next 9 hours clinging to debris before finally being rescued. She is the only lucky one. All of her roommates perish. At the school, 16 children and 5 teachers are lost. But the tsunami is not finished with Hawaii. 37 kilometers south of Laupahoehoe, the sleepy trading town of Hilo Bay is also caught unawares. Here, the tsunami destroys nearly 500 homes and businesses, kills 96, and injures hundreds.
Descriptions of the 1946 tsunami were that it came across the breakwater with the greatest of ease, just overcame it, and then washed across town. Other people describe seeing boulders blasted out as the water surged across.
Walter Dudley is an oceanographer from the University of Hawaii in Hilo Bay. For more than 20 years, he's studied tsunamis. One of his most significant findings is that their destructive power is caused not just by the wave itself, but also by what's underneath them.
Well, one of the things that makes them such an interesting phenomenon to study is that they are all different. And as they travel across the oceans, they're affected by the ocean floor along their tracks. So the waves are constantly being bent or refracted. And then as they come ashore, they are further altered.
No two pieces of coastline are the same. Each has its own unique undersea topography that affects the waves differently. In Hilo, it is the natural rounded shape of the bay.
You can think of a bathtub, and as little children get in a bathtub, they can slosh the water back and forth, and they quickly find out that there's a speed at which the water will really move.
The first 2 waves to hit the bathtub-shaped Hilo Bay caused the water to slosh back and forth. When a third wave arrived, it combined with the sloshing water to produce a larger and more destructive wave.
It pretty much wiped out everything that was on the ocean side of town. In the main parts of downtown, it picked up the railway and it twisted the railway rails into pretzels.
The third wave reached a run-up height of 9 meters. It destroyed most of the foreshore of Hilo Bay. But less than 15 years after the '46 disaster, Hawaii would again be hit by a deadly tsunami. A wave bigger than the last that would defy logic and bring Hilo to its knees once more. On May 22, 1960, the largest earthquake in recorded history ruptures the Earth's crust off the coast of Chile. 1,000 kilometers of the ocean floor is violently thrust up 20 meters, spawning a monster tsunami. It's so huge and powerful that it crosses the entire Pacific Ocean, slamming into Hawaii on the way. This time, technology installed since the 1946 quake warns residents of Hilo Bay 5 hours in advance. But the warning falls on deaf ears.
In the preceding 12 years, about 3 out of 4 alarms had turned out to be small tsunamis. So instead of inspiring fear, let's get away from this potential disaster, I think it inspired curiosity, because it is a fascinating phenomenon. Let's go down and watch.
Although the civil defense were saying people evacuate, there were a lot of us, me included, that out of curiosity went down to look, to see what was going to happen.
Local real estate agent Al Inouye and many others assume that because this wave is coming from the southeast and Hilo faces the north, the bay will be spared. They are wrong. Just after midnight, the first wave strikes.
You could hear people yelling and screaming behind me that were being caught in a wave. That was an experience because, and it still stays in my mind, all this screaming and yelling, and I couldn't do anything about it. It sounded like several trains, rushing down a track. I mean, it was really a roar. And, you can hear the crashing of houses against each other. It's hard to describe. It was just a sound that you don't want to hear again. I mean, it was horrible.
Dawn breaks on a nightmare. 61 people are dead and more than 700 buildings destroyed or severely damaged. The 1960 tsunami took locals and experts by surprise. After thorough study, scientists discovered a remarkable aspect of the tsunami. As the wave reached the shallow water off the southeast coast of the island, the middle of the wave slowed, while the outside of the wave kept moving, causing the wave to wrap around the island. Then, just as in 1946, the natural shape of the bay added to the tsunami's destructive power. This time, the largest wave had a run-up height of 10.5 meters, 1.5 meters higher than in 1946. But Hawaii wasn't the only location struck by the monster tsunami. It roared thousands of kilometers across the Pacific, striking virtually every coast, including Japan, where 122 people died.
Tsunamis have an incredible amount of energy, and as they travel across the ocean, they use up very, very little of that. It's when they come ashore that all that energy is unleashed.
The 1946 and 1960 tsunamis gave scientists new insights into the complex behavior and ocean-crossing power of these giant waves. But when a local tsunami hits Japan, it strikes with larger and more powerful waves than the 46 and 60 Hawaiian tsunamis combined. And there's no time to evacuate. And later, a tsunami that combines sudden impact with awesome size, a mega disaster. The 1946 and 1960 Hawaiian tsunamis had run-up heights of 9 and 10.5 meters. Shaped and intensified by the ocean floor and coastline, they smashed the island communities with unexpected force. But there's another tsunami hotspot where a larger and more deadly wave struck without warning. Second only to Hawaii, Japan is the most tsunami-prone location in the Pacific. The Japanese have been hit so many times by these giant waves that they created the word tsunami, meaning harbor wave, to describe these terrifying events. These waves can come from as far away as Chile or as close as 80 kilometers offshore. The locally generated tsunamis pose the greatest danger. They strike within minutes of being formed and with awesome power. (10:17 p.m., July 12, 1993. A magnitude 7.8 earthquake rips the ocean floor off the coast of Hokkaido. The epicenter is only 80 kilometers from the tiny island of Okushiri and generates one of the biggest and most destructive tsunamis Japan has ever experienced. Fisherman Jiro Adachi from the village of Aonai knows about tsunamis. He survived one 10 years earlier that also hit Okushiri. When Jiro feels the earthquake, he knows a tsunami is probable. He quickly evacuates his wife and children from their seaside home, sending them to higher ground in the car while he shuts off the gas. He moves swiftly, but not swiftly enough. Just 4 minutes after the quake, the first wave hits him with overwhelming force as it surges to an incredible 15 meters.
It started to pull me back into the sea. I held on to something and thought that I must run to the mountain.
Somehow, Jiro manages to find firm ground. He flees to the safety of a nearby hill. In a few terrifying minutes, the tsunami destroys 80 houses and fishing shacks. But the danger is not over. Out of the darkness, a second wave strikes. Homes, boats, cars and trucks, spared by the first wave, are smashed to pieces. Fires erupt as gas pipes burst. Aonai is under siege. Jiro and other survivors rush to the waterfront to help the injured.
We heard people shouting for help. They were calling, "Help me, help me." I heard a lot of voices, women's voices and children's voices.
Suddenly, amidst the cries for help, Jiro hears something that chills his heart.
Suddenly I heard a familiar voice between wave breaks, so I shouted, "Achan, is that you, Achan?" And then I heard, "Daddy." I heard that from the darkness.
His young daughter is somewhere in the raging sea. As Jiro's family fled, the tsunami's first wave rolled their car and hurled them into the ocean. Jiro dives into the turbulent waters.
Normally I'm a great swimmer, but this was incredibly difficult. Sometimes I was swimming, but I couldn't move forward at all. And other times I'd suddenly be pulled backwards by the sea.
Miraculously, father and daughter make it to shore. 7 hours later, the Coast Guard finds Jiro's wife and son kilometers out to sea, clinging to debris. As dawn breaks, the tsunami's power becomes horrifically clear. Large parts of Aonai are completely flattened. Fires continue to rage, and most of the fishing fleet is lost. Across the island, 437 houses are destroyed and more than 800 severely damaged. 198 people are dead. The aftermath of the disaster confronts scientists with an intriguing mystery. The two waves that hit Aonai came from completely different directions.
The first wave of the tsunami came from the west area where the seismic center was, and it attacked only the low part in the south area of Aonai.
But the second wave came from the east, away from the tsunami's source.
The second wave came in just 10 minutes after the first, and it attacked all of this area of Aonai.
The The first wave that hit the west coast of Okushiri came directly from the source. But then, just like in Hawaii, the tsunami wrapped around the island, creating a second wave that struck Iona from the opposite direction. But the wraparound effect does not explain why the tsunami hit Okushiri with such brutal force. The reason is the extreme proximity of the event which created the tsunami. After a tsunami is generated, it radiates out like ripples on a pond. As the ripples expand wider and wider, the energy spreads out over a larger area. The closer the source of the tsunami is to the impact zone, the more concentrated the energy. Okushiri was only 80 kilometers from the source, so it received the full brunt of the tsunami. Just north of Aonai, the waves reached a staggering 31 meters. Today, the legacy of the 1993 tsunami is set in concrete. Huge walls up to 11 meters high and extending 14 kilometers along the coast stand guard against the sea. Powerful steel gates protect river mouths, and the harbor is bolstered by concrete blocks to reduce wave impact. These ramparts against the waves are stronger than normal sea walls for good reason. The forces they must withstand are utterly different. Normal waves form through the transfer of energy from the wind to the ocean surface. Tsunamis are generated by phenomenal transfers of energy. Even the largest wind waves have a maximum wavelength from crest to crest of a few hundred meters. Tsunamis can have wavelengths of hundreds of kilometers. When they hit, they keep coming and coming. In a unique experiment, scientists in Japan are measuring the impact of those forces. At this lab in Kanagawa, engineers are using the largest man-made tsunami in the world to help design stronger coastal structures. This machine can generate waves more than 3 meters high, propelling 300 cubic meters of water down a 180-meter long chute.
The best thing is to know the characteristics of the power of tsunami in each situation and build buildings according to those characteristics.
Taro Arikawa leads a team that measures the power of tsunamis under controlled conditions. This tsunami is only 2/3 of a meter high, but it strikes with 1 ton per square meter of power. To demonstrate what that kind of power can do, Arikawa puts himself in the wave's line of fire. Without the rope and harness, he'd be swept away by this miniature tsunami. Bigger tsunamis are even more powerful. This 2.4-meter wave hits with the force of 10 tons per square meter. Even after the initial impact, it continues to surge forward with a sustained pressure of 4 tons per square meter. The tsunami in Okushiri was much higher and hundreds of times more powerful. Scientists here believe their studies will translate into stronger and better engineered structures, capable of withstanding tsunami strikes.
Once we can reduce the power, the reduced destructive power of tsunami coming ashore would not cause as much damage.
The Okushiri event shows how destructive a local tsunami can be. It strikes with undiluted power and too quickly to respond. But that disaster was eclipsed by a far bigger and more deadly tsunami. A wave generated by an earthquake so powerful it moved the entire planet. A wave that takes us one step closer to a mega disaster. The tsunami that hit Okushiri, Japan, came from just 80 kilometers away and reached a run-up height of 31 meters. It killed 198 people and destroyed most of the fishing village of Aonai. but it pales in comparison to the deadliest tsunami of modern times. (7:58 a.m., December 26, 2004. Deep in the ocean off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, 1,200 kilometers of the Earth's crust ruptures in the second largest earthquake ever recorded. The 9.3 quake shatters buildings and destroys lives. But it is just a forerunner of an even more horrific disaster. An epic tsunami spreads across the entire Indian Ocean, striking 12 countries. As with Okushiri, Japan, the local effects are the most immediate and the most devastating. 16 minutes after the quake and 250 kilometers from its epicenter, northern Sumatra is struck by 35-meter-high waves. The capital city of Banda Aceh is decimated. More than 160,000 people are killed. Coastal engineer Jose Borrero arrived in Banda Aceh 4 days behind the tsunami.
I've seen hurricane damage, and I've seen some flood damage before, and I've seen a lot of tsunami after effects before also, but this definitely was the worst. What was amazing about it was the scale.
70% of all buildings in Banda Aceh are flattened. More than 70 kilometers of coastline show evidence of wave heights above 30 meters.
It was a level of destruction that was over hundreds of miles of the coastline, the same level of destruction. So it wasn't just isolated pockets of areas that were wiped out, but the entire coast and then the entire city of Banda Aceh.
An hour and a half after Banda Aceh is leveled, the tsunami strikes Thailand. A wall of water swamps beachside villas, hotels, and villages.
That wave is a good 15, 20 feet tall. Easy. Get in.
More than 8,000 people die. (2,000 kilometers to the west, on the island nation of Sri Lanka, 100 billion tons of water surges inland, killing 35,000 people and leaving another 500,000 homeless. In all, nearly 230,000 people die in the most devastating tsunami in recorded history. The death toll higher than for all other major tsunamis in the past 300 years combined. The power of the earthquake that triggered the tsunami was staggering. The entire planet's sea level rose by 1/10 of a millimeter. Every spot on Earth moved at least 1 centimeter. As scientists struggle to comprehend the enormity of the event, a bizarre anomaly comes to light. One that took an additional tragic toll. The morning of December 26 is quietly dawning on the peaceful shores of Galle, Sri Lanka. British tourists Camilla and Dominic Welby are sleeping in their beachside bungalow with their 11-year-old son, Hector. Suddenly, Dominic is wakened by a strange noise.
I went outside onto the veranda and I noticed that the water, which should have been at low tide, was up against the wall of the garden.
What Dominic is seeing, without realizing it, is the first sign of the tsunami. At the point of its creation, the bottom of the tsunami, called the negative wave, went east towards Thailand and Indonesia, while the top, called the positive wave, went west towards Sri Lanka. When the bottom of a wave arrives first, gravity sucks the water out, lowering the sea level. When the top of a wave arrives first, it comes like a flood. This is what the Welbys are experiencing.
I didn't know what it was. And at that moment, the floor exploded.
The tsunami rushes in, destroying the bungalow.
The force of the water was phenomenal. You know, to be exploded out of your bed, you know, to feel a piece of furniture just be thrown up into the air and to be thrown off it and to have to jump it's just very weird. And to then be sucked out and tossed around like being in a washing machine.
The couple grab their son and scramble into the bathroom.
With each wave, with the intensity of each wave, it would fill up the shower cubicle completely. We would be swirling around underwater, trying to, regain our purchase on whatever we could find.
As the waves continue to pound, the concrete walls of the bathroom begin to crumble. Hector is trapped under a large piece of concrete, struggling to keep his head above water.
The idea of your child dying before you it's nothing worse.
A third wave surges over Hector's head. He's seconds from death. But instead of drowning him, miraculously it lifts the concrete slab off his foot and releases him. The wave that's caused so much death in this one instance is life-saving. But mostly, the peculiar behavior of tsunami waves proves deadly. Surging forward and sucking back, billions of tons of swift-moving water carry a dangerous mass of deadly projectiles, broken timber, glass, metal, and vehicles. The third wave turned Galle into one of the hardest-hit areas in the nation. As the people of Sri Lanka struggle to recover, tsunami scientists like James Goff arrive in the devastated nation.
One of the really difficult things when you go into these areas is you are going there because you have a mission to learn about the tsunami from a scientific point of view. It's very important to learn these things, and yet there is the human tragedy going on around you, and it's very difficult to isolate yourself from that human tragedy.
Amidst the horror, Goff and his colleagues discover the oddity of the third wave.
So there's Galle quietly sitting there, recovering from being hit by two waves, and then bang.
How and why the Galle area was hit by this third wave intrigued experts. Where did it come from? The first clue in the mystery was uncovered by looking at a global map. Sri Lanka is directly in the line of fire of the tsunami.
Sri Lanka was basically staring down the barrel of a loaded gun in a way.
The second clue came only after careful analysis of the tsunami's unique behavior.
So the tsunami wave goes all the way past Sri Lanka, heading off to the east coast of Africa. But on the way, whack, it hits into the Maldives, and a lot of the energy is reflected back from the Maldives, and the first place that hits is Galle.
The tsunami was so powerful, its reflected energy carried a third wave 800 kilometers back across the Indian Ocean. In total, over 4,000 people died in the Galle region. The tragedy confirmed scientists' theories about the phenomenal reflective power of tsunamis. The Indian Ocean tsunami continues to provide scientists with complex and compelling new data, most of which is still being processed.
It's really difficult to say right now what the Boxing Day tsunami taught us compared to what we didn't know before, because it's taught us so much. It taught us that we actually don't know a lot and that we have a lot more to learn.
What the Welbys learned is that life is fleeting and precious. In appreciation for their survival and in recognition of the thousands that did not, they spearheaded a fundraising effort back home in England. To date, they've raised $25,000 for the people of Galle. Many mysteries about the Indian Ocean tsunami remain unanswered. One of the biggest questions is how the highest waves could possibly have reached a staggering run-up height of 35 meters. Far beyond what had been thought physically possible by an earthquake-triggered tsunami. But as huge as that tsunami was, it is not the biggest wave to strike in recent history. Landslides can trigger a different kind of killer wave, producing a tsunami of monstrous size. And scientists believe a mega tsunami looms in our future, a wave of such epic proportions that nothing like it has been seen since prehistoric times. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami unleashed a series of enormous and deadly waves that had run-ups of 35 meters. But they are dwarfed by another wave that forced scientists to become detectives. What they discovered was a new kind of tsunami, one of unimaginable size and power. In a remote bay in southwest Alaska, a native legend tells of a beast that shakes the ocean and destroys those who walk its shores. In 1958, a local fisherman came face to face with that beast. A mysterious wave more than twice the height of the Golden Gate Bridge. The story of this incredible phenomenon began 5 years earlier, with 2 American geologists on assignment in remote Lituya Bay, Alaska.
We were in the bay mapping the geology and primarily interested in the stratigraphy because of the oil potential of that part of the Gulf of Alaska.
They didn't find any oil, but they did find one of the scientific mysteries of the century. George Plafka was one of the scientists.
One of the obvious things you see when you're in that bay, if you're looking closely, is that the trees are of different ages as you go away from the shoreline.
Plafka and his colleague noticed that a band of younger trees circled the entire bay hundreds of meters above the water. The scientists knew this dramatic change in vegetation meant a large-scale disaster had struck the area. But they saw no evidence of fire or avalanches.
And so we speculated about what that could be and had all kinds of ideas about glaciers shoving forward very rapidly. The other was that there were submarine slides going on at some of the deltas along the margin of the bay, or that there was breakouts of large amounts of water up higher along the glaciers and then they flood down all of a sudden. We had everything except the right way, the right idea about how those waves could form.
The geologists left Lituya Bay without solving their mystery. 5 years later, they got their answer. In 1958, Howard Ulrich takes his 8-year-old son, Howard Jr., on a fishing trip to Lituya Bay.
So we went into our favorite anchoring spot and dropped our anchor and made supper, and finally about 9 o'clock we went to our bunks.
An hour later, the boat starts shaking violently. An 8.3 earthquake centered 21 kilometers from Lituya Bay rips across the water. Howard and his son rush up on deck just in time to see the most amazing sight of their lives.
It looked like a big explosion, like you've seen big explosions in the water on TV. That's exactly what it looked like.
What happens next defies the imagination.
As the spray started to settle down, out of the bottom of it came this huge wave. I would say that the wave was close to 1,000 feet high at that time, the actual wave.
Traveling at an estimated 112 kilometers per hour, the liquid mountain is charging straight for Howard and his son.
Just coal black and full of logs, just straight up and down. It was actually a pretty horrifying looking sight. I just thought, you know, this is the end. There's no way you're going to get out of this, you know.
In a desperate attempt to keep control of his boat, Howard turns on his engine and drives directly into the beast.
started pulling all the anchor chain out, and when it got to the end of the chain, I thought it was going to pull the bow of the boat under, but it snapped that chain just like it wasn't even there.
The giant wave lifts the tiny boat high into the air.
And I looked out over the stern of the boat, and we were looking down on the trees, and I figured that's where we were going to end up.
Unbelievably, their boat rides up and over the wave, and the Ulriches land back in the bay unharmed. 2 other vessels and their 4 occupants are not as lucky. This incredible footage was filmed the next day. Everything in the wave's path is destroyed, no trees are left standing, and most soil is ripped off down to bedrock.
The run-up height of 1,740 feet is the world record, I think, for anything that's happened in historic time. And it was, you know, it's 500 feet higher than the Empire State Building. That's pretty big.
The earthquake felt by Howard triggered a massive rock slide, sending 30 million cubic meters of mountain hurtling into Lituya Bay. The debris slammed into the water, creating the giant wave.
It just swooped down a very steep slope and ran out into the fjord and basically forced all the water out of that little arm in front of the glacier and shot it up over the ridge that was on the other side.
One mystery remained. The amount of water displaced exceeded the amount of land that fell into the bay. It took 42 years to solve this mystery. Scientific models determine that the rapidly moving landslide created an air pocket behind the wave, preventing the water from sloshing back. The force of the air pocket combined with the size and weight of the landslide shot the water out of the bay like a missile.
It would be the same as if you took a paddle and ran it down and pushed into the water full speed at a high velocity. Just push all the water right out.
The effects of the giant Lituya Bay wave remain clearly visible today. The event rewrote the history books and changed our understanding of tsunamis forever. Landslides can and do produce waves far larger and more destructive than ever thought possible. Lituya Bay's desolate location limited the damage caused by the giant tsunami. But should an even bigger landslide-generated wave strike a major city, the result will be a mega disaster. In 1958, a landslide-generated tsunami, taller than the Empire State Building, obliterated an Alaskan inlet. It was a devastating display of nature's power. But across the Pacific Ocean, on the gentle slopes of Oahu, Hawaii, scientists have uncovered evidence of a potential disaster that would dwarf the Indian Ocean and Lituya Bay tsunamis combined.
It's almost incomprehensible, the scale, the enormity of these things. It would be quite a view.
Gerard Fryer is a geophysicist from the University of Hawaii. He uses advanced computer modeling and field data to forecast tsunamis. His research has uncovered a potential wave so big that even the best laid evacuation plans may not be enough.
These things have been described as culture-ending events. The state would essentially be knocked back to the Stone Age.
This mega tsunami would combine the dizzying height of a landslide-triggered wave with a tsunami that strikes a densely populated landmass, in this case, Hawaii. On the island of Oahu, locals and tourists alike flock to the sea, soaking in the perfect climate and idyllic lifestyle of one of the most iconic coastlines on the planet. But in our scenario, everyone is oblivious to the fact that less than 480 kilometers to the east, a disaster of biblical proportions is about to strike. The mega disaster is triggered by the eruption of the world's largest volcano, Mauna Loa, on the big island of Hawaii.
In the case of Mauna Loa, and that's the 800-pound gorilla here, that's the big volcano that we have to worry about. As Mauna Loa is preparing for eruption, the southwest rift zone of Mauna Loa inflates with magma. The entire mountain swells, which means that the outer slopes get steeper. There are probably a succession of small earthquakes, and then maybe a big earthquake that shakes loose this very steep western flank of the volcano.
Almost 1,500 cubic kilometers of earth and rock plummet into the sea. On impact, the land displaces a massive amount of water. The ocean rushes back to fill the giant gap. From this cataclysmic disturbance emerges the tsunami, heading directly for Honolulu. Estimated time to impact, 30 minutes.
This is the direction that a big tsunami would come from the big island.
The wave first becomes visible as it stands and breaks on a shallow bank, 40 kilometers southeast of Honolulu.
You'd see the sea rear up in front of you. It would be huge. It would rise up above you the size of a building, the size of a 10-story building.
Surging inland at up to 70 kilometers per hour, the tsunami slams Honolulu. Because the tsunami's energy stretches down to the ocean floor, this wave is not clean water. It's filled with sand, coral, and rock. Water penetrates 16 kilometers inland before being sucked back out to sea in a lethal maelstrom of wreckage. It annihilates nearly everyone and everything in its path.
These giant landslides, as far as we can tell, they seem to occur during periods of high sea level when the climate is warm. Quite why that is, we don't know. But we are in a warm period right now with high sea level. So we should expect something like this within the next 10 or 20,000 years.
As the unofficial tsunami capital of the Pacific, Hawaii is preparing for the future. Scientists continue to develop a global network of warning systems based on real-time seismic analysis and deep-sea wave sensors. Alarms will sound as soon as 90 seconds after the initiation of even a small tsunami. Tsunamis are global-sized events with global ramifications. They combine the almost unlimited power of the Earth with the gargantuan might of the sea. They are a humbling reminder of the transience of man and the awesome strength of nature. While scientists learn more about tsunamis, engineers build stronger coastal barriers, and experts implement improved warning systems, individual vigilance remains essential.
And you see the water withdrawing, strangely, curiosity shouldn't compel you to go down and see what's going to happen next. The alarm bell should be going off.
It's something that we need to have embedded in our culture, in our knowledge base, and in our education so that we know what to do when the next tsunami happens. Not if, it's when. It's something we need to learn to live with.
As long as we continue to have the phenomena that create these giant waves, we will continue to have tsunamis. It's just a matter of time before the next one strikes.